We've heard by now that Texas and Oklahoma are in talks with the Big 12 to leave the conference a year earlier than anticipated. Thanks to an article by Dennis Dodd of CBS Sports, there could actually be multiple ways it could help the conference if that actually happens. I know what you're thinking. There's no way, Couz. They're the two biggest brands in the league. There's no way the Big 12 can benefit. But I'm going to give you three reasons why they actually could. So pull up a chair, sit back, relax, and let's talk about it. What is up, college sports fans, Big 12 fans, and fellow members of Mountaineer Nation? This is Couz. Welcome into another edition of Couz's Corner. So pull that chair up and let me serve you up this shot of top shelf college football content. In this episode, yes, we're talking Big 12 conference. We're talking Texas and Oklahoma potentially leaving a year earlier than anticipated and going to the SEC in 2024 instead of 2025. And I'm going to give you a list of three ways that could actually help the league and what the league could do to take advantage of it. First, I'm going to share a little bit of this article from Dennis Dodd with you that I referenced in the opening. It says, early exit for Texas, Oklahoma to SEC could be aided by future non-conference games at Big 12 stadiums. So, yes, and I mentioned this in a previous episode. One of the ways they could repay the Big 12 is say, hey, we will play games against Big 12 competition to help cover the cost because we know that Texas and Oklahoma does bring more TV eyeballs. But here's the article. It says, with conversations increasing around the possibility of Texas and Oklahoma leaving the Big 12 for the SEC earlier than scheduled, the steps needed to facilitate such a move are coming into focus. It is likely any deal involving the Longhorns and Sooners joining the SEC a year early in 2024 would include Big 12 rights holders being made whole with a series of future non-conference games involving those teams within the league's footprint. Industry sources tell CBS Sports. Presently, the Big 12 grant of rights expires in 2025, freeing Texas and Oklahoma to join the SEC that summer. However, discussions about Texas and Oklahoma receiving an early exit from the Big 12 ramped up 3 weeks ago. Word of those talks began to leak last week during the Big 12 meetings in Las Vegas. The Big 12's two media rights holders, Fox and ESPN, are key factors that complicate the situation. At the heart of the matter, how viewership would be impacted on Fox and ESPN in 2024 if Texas and Oklahoma left before that season. There would be an obvious decline in viewership for the Big 12 package, and by extension, the value of the Big 12 media rights deal, without games from the conference's biggest national names. Texas and Oklahoma are using SEC TV consultant Alan Gold to facilitate a deal, sources tell CBS Sports. The idea would be to use games as currency, atoning for the viewership decline with Texas and Oklahoma playing a selection of future non-conference games at Big 12 schools. They would have to play games in the Big 12 footprint so Fox and ESPN can have value. An industry source told CBS Sports, if ESPN and Fox are happy, the Big 12 would be happy. That could potentially lead to the continuation of the Bedlam series between Oklahoma and Oklahoma State that was expected to end when OU joined the SEC in 2025. When those games would be played or how many would be scheduled is not yet known. Ultimately, the Big 12 was in the position to either say yay or nay, said one person involved in the negotiations. The Action Network first reported on the escalated talks with Texas and Oklahoma potentially leaving the Big 12 for the SEC in 2024. Sources differ in categorizing the likelihood of a deal, with some believing it imminent, while others consider a resolution improbable. To summarize this, the article basically goes on to say there are many sources out there who don't think this will actually happen at all, that they will end up staying through 2025. But then there are some who believe this could happen early in 2023. They could actually get a deal done and it be announced. The article by Brett McMurphy of Action Network said it could happen next month, which would be January of 23, which would fit that timeline that some other sources are saying in early of 2023. Now, this gets even more interesting. It says at least one reason why the two collegiate powerhouses want out early is to avoid sharing space with new Big 12 entries BYU, Cincinnati, Houston, and UCF. Those four programs joined the Big 12 for a 14-team league at least for 2023. This latest development likely explains why the Big 12 has yet to announce a scheduling format for next season. You know, we've all been waiting anxiously for that Big 12 schedule to come out, and it still has yet to do so. And now I'm hearing it could be January of 23 before it comes out. But the article goes on to say Texas and Oklahoma have been pushing pretty adamantly that they want to exit sooner rather than later. A Big 12 source tells CBS Sports. They seem to have issue with 4 new universities we brought into our conference. That's kind of expedited things. I feel like something will be worked out for them to leave the league a year early. Texas and Oklahoma would at least owe the Big 12 a termination fee for leaving early. The contract states any school departing early owes 2 years' worth of revenue. Using an average annual figure of $42 million, the Big 12 could reap as much as $168 million if Texas and Oklahoma give notice to the league 18 months in advance. And that $168 million is going to factor into the 3 reasons I'm going to give you in a minute as to why how the Big 12 could benefit and use that to their advantage. It says the sum could be negotiated down if both sides are willing. But then it goes on to say, whatever monies are paid could conceivably be used to fund Big 12 expansion, sources told CBS Sports. I'm going to read that again. Whatever monies are paid could conceivably be used to fund Big 12 expansion, sources told CBS Sports. It can also be distributed to existing members. Now, those are 2 of the reasons I'm going to give you in a minute, and I'm going to break the numbers down for you as to why the Big 12 could benefit from this and how they use Texas and Oklahoma leaving to their advantage. I'm going to use the expansion piece and the distribution piece. But there's another piece I'm going to talk about, and that specifically involves the 4 new members. Okay? So let's get into that right now. Like I said earlier, there are 3 logical ways I could see this money being split, the $168 million being split. You could divide it. The easy way would be to take the $168 million, divide it evenly among the 12 Big 12 members. That's equivalent of $14 million per school. Now, personally, I think that's a great option. Looking at my team, West Virginia, for example, there's a lot West Virginia could do with $14 million. If Neil Brown doesn't do real well this upcoming season, they decide to fire him, that $14 million could help pay for his buyout. It could go towards hiring more and better assistant coaches. It could go towards paying off some debt. Whatever the case may be, there's a lot of uses for that $14 million, not only for West Virginia, but for any program in the Big 12. The second scenario I come up with, which is probably a less likely scenario, directly involves the 4 new incoming members, UCF, BYU, Houston, and Cincinnati. Now, when you look at Houston, when you look at the 4 new members and the payout they're going to get when they come in, the first 2 years of the deal, 2023 and 2024, they're going to get $18 million in year 1 per school and $19 million in year 2 per school. And I got this information, by the way, from blackandgoldbanneret.com, who covers UCF for SB Nation. But they're not getting the full $31.6 million payout in the first 2 years. The new schools are not. They're getting $18 million in year 1 and $19 million in year 2. And then once Texas and Oklahoma leave in 2025, then their payout will go up to the full $31.6 million per year. That's what the article says. Now, one way they could divide this money, that $168 million, they could take, if Texas and Oklahoma leave a year early, maybe the 4 new schools go to the Big 12 and say, hey, wait a minute. Now that these 4 schools are leaving early, we want our full payout, our $31.6 million in year 2 instead of year 3 of being in the conference. And the way the Big 12 could do that would be to say, okay, if you want it, we're going to take the money out of the $168 million we received from the Texas and Oklahoma exit fees and put that towards your payout in year 2. We give you $12.6 million per school for 2024. That gets you up to the $31.6 million full payout. But we're taking the other $117.6 million that's left over from that, and we're dividing it evenly among the other 8 members, which gives them $14.7 million per school. The third scenario, and the one the article mentions, was regarding conference expansion. The Big 12 could take the $168 million they get from Texas and Oklahoma and put it towards adding new members to the league. Now, when you look at the Big 12's new media deal that they just signed that goes through 2031 with Fox and ESPN, it kicks in 2025, goes through 2031. It's a 6-year deal, right? There's a pro rata clause in that deal that says if the Big 12 adds any members from another Power 5 conference, the payout will increase. However, it doesn't increase the full $31.6 million a year because Fox so far has not agreed to be part of that pro rata clause. Only ESPN has. Now, ESPN is the primary rights holder of the agreement, which means that, and they own about 60% of the rights. So the new members would get about 60% of that $31.6 million, which puts them at about $20 million per year. Now, if you take that $168 million and divide it out over a 6-year period, which is the length of the TV deal, it equals out to $28 million a year. Okay? So there's $28 million a year times 6 years comes up to $168 million total. So if you want to add money to their media deal, you take $28 million, divide it by the 4 schools that you get from the Pac-12. Let's say you want to add Arizona, Arizona State, Utah, and Colorado. Each of those schools get $28 million to be added to whatever the Big 12 media deal is, which is $20 million, which would be $20 million a year for them. If you divide that out over 6 years, it's $7 million annually per school. So that automatically puts their value at $27 million per year. That's a lot better than 20 and only about $4.5 million off of what the Big 12's making. And there's a good chance that $27 million could end up being more than what they'll make in the Pac-12. And you throw in the fact that right now, and I give a shout out to College Football's Peak Around the Corner with Greg Flugeier. I recommend you go check his channel out, but I got this information from his channel. Add in the fact that right now the Pac-12 looks to be potentially leaning towards giving the majority of their broadcast rights to Amazon versus using linear television. That might make it even more appealing for some of these teams to leave the Pac-12 for the Big 12 because they'll have less exposure by being on Amazon versus being on linear networks. And if they're going to make $27 million a year and get more exposure, it could be very enticing to some of these schools. Think about that, folks. You get $27 million. You get more exposure for your football, and if you're Arizona, your basketball teams, you get more stability because you're in a conference that has a grant of rights signed, that has a 6-year TV deal already signed, sealed, delivered. Not signed yet, but it will be soon. At least expectations are that it will be soon. Then it may be a no-brainer for some of them. And it wouldn't, like I said, it would be less than the full $31.6 million that the existing Big 12 members would be getting. But it could still be a lot more than they'll be making as members of the Pac-12. It'll be interesting to see how this plays out. And don't forget that $31.6 million doesn't include college football playoff money, and it doesn't include NCAA tournament money. And we all know the Big 12 is arguably the best basketball conference in the nation. They usually put a lot of teams into the NCAA tournament. And for every team that gets put into the NCAA tournament, the conference makes money. There's a good chance they would make more NCAA tournament money in the Big 12 than they will in the Pac-12. So that could also be enticing as part of this deal. Now, basketball, it's not a huge amount of money, but it's still, we can still be talking about millions of dollars here. It could be even more enticing for some of these Pac-12 schools to join the Big 12 if the Big 12 can use the exit money from Texas and Oklahoma as part of the deal for them joining. Something very interesting to think about. If you're watching this on YouTube, I ask that you please hit that subscribe button below. Help me get to my 5,000 subscriber mark that I'm trying to get to. Please hit the thumbs up button on the video. Please share it out with all of your friends. Please drop a comment below. Let me know what you think of this scenario. How would you like to see the Big 12 use the money they would get from Texas and Oklahoma if Texas and Oklahoma leave early? If you're listening to this on podcast platform, please follow this podcast. There'll be a lot of West Virginia Mountaineer content, a lot of Big 12 content to follow. I'm proud to be a new member of the Pigskin Podcast Network. There are several ways you can support my show here at Couz's Corner. You can check out some of my merch. There'll be a link in the description box to do that. If you're watching on YouTube, you'll see pictures of my merch down below the description box. Click one of my merch items there. It'll take you right into my merch store where you can pick out what you want. I've got hoodies. I've got beanies. I've got ball caps. I've got T-shirts. I've got tank tops. I've got bandanas. I've got coffee mugs. I've got iPhone cases, mouse pads. I've got clothing for your pets, clothing for your kids, clothing for your babies, your wife, whoever it might be in your family, in your household. Check out my merch store, several different designs to choose from. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see them on the screen now. You can join the channel. Hit the join button right below my channel to become a member of Couz's Corner here on YouTube. Like I said, if you're listening on podcast platforms, please follow my show. Please download my episodes. All that help me out. And please, if you don't mind, go leave a rating of my show too. Let me know what you like, what you don't like. And if you liked it, please give me a 5-star rating. With that being said, I really appreciate you tuning in to this episode of Couz's Corner. And until the next one, Q Country Roads. West Virginia.